Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Today I brought for you all May June 2025 2281 paper 21. We will be doing section A today, that is the data response question. Let's quickly dive into the paper and see what section A has brought for us today. Looking at the source material, first they've given us a table. We've talked about Gabon's industries and labor force. The fact file displays information for the year 2022. It talks about the GDP that stands at $22 billion. It talks about the GDP per head, which is 13,800 per person in dollars again. The oil output produced by Gabon in 2022 was around $6.6 billion. The unemployment rate stood at 23.2% and the youth unemployment rate was 38.4%. That means if its unemployed population hovered around 23%. Out of this 23%, 38% comprised of youth. Gabon is actually a small West African country and its rainforests contribute in reducing air pollution and they provide wood for timber production, protect against floods and reduce soil erosion. So these are the external benefits which Gabon's rainforests are providing. The positive externalities you can also define in other terms. The Gabonese government wants to conserve the country's rainforest. So now this is what the government is intending to do. It has created some national parks, which has increased tourism, affecting the current account of the balance of payments. So now in order to protect the rainforest, it has constructed several national parks that have been also the center for tourism. So it has boosted tourism. The Gabonese government wants to reduce the country's reliance on timber production, oil production, and agriculture. So now what the government is intending to do is reducing its dependency on the primary sector, right? Oil production, timber, and agriculture. It wants to maybe depend more on the services of the tertiary sector for contribution towards the GDP. The country is Africa's fifth largest oil producer, but its resources of oil are running out. Although it is one of the biggest oil producing in country of Africa, however, the fear is that the rate at which it is using its oil resources is actually causing the oil reserves to deplete or run out. The oil industry causes water pollution. The country has other natural resources, including gold. In 2022, new deposits of gold were found in Gabon. So now they are saying that, yes, the reason why the government is so concerned about oil production is that A, it's being utilized at a rate which is threatening for the future generation, right? Because the availability would then be a question mark. Plus, it also contributes towards water pollution. That's again a negative externality. The country has also found certain gold reserves as well. Now they've given us further details about the agriculture industry. They're saying the agriculture industry employs a high proportion of the country's labor force. This figure 1.1 shows the literacy rate and the percentage of the labor force employed in agriculture in 6 selected countries in 2022. So now what they're giving us is they've given us literacy rate on the horizontal axis and the vertical axis displays the amount of labor force employed in each country in agriculture. So now these are 6 countries and you can see Mali is there, Sierra Leone is there, Mauritania is there, Tunisia is there, Gabon is there, and South Africa is there. So now if you try to decipher what the figure is trying to tell us is, look at the literacy rate. So Mali has the lowest literacy rate, that is around 35%, and it's almost 80% of the labor force is employed in agriculture. So this means what? That the lower the literacy rate is, the higher the amount of country's labor force is employed in agriculture. So the higher the literacy rate, that is in South Africa, which is hovering around 85%, the amount of labor force which is employed in agriculture is less than 10%. So this means the more illiterate a labor force would be, the higher its inclination would be to employ it in tertiary sector, right? Not in the primary sector, not in agriculture. They're moving towards more skilled jobs. All right. In recent years, Gabon has experienced a high rate of unemployment among 15 to 24-year-olds. High rates of youth unemployment, this means its younger population is experiencing unemployment, especially those who are around 15 to 24 years of age. They are seeing youth unemployment means that they're not gaining the skills and experience needed to achieve high productivity. That's something of concern. It can also have a harmful effect on their confidence, absolutely, when the youth is out of job, so it negatively impacts their mental well-being, and having they would be demotivated, right? Some governments pay private sector firms to give work experience to unemployed young people. So actually governments are being incentivized to provide jobs to these young individuals in order to boost their morale. The quality of the experience can vary, and what jobs do they get or how much support are they being provided depends. The Gabonese government wants to develop the textile industry, encouraging firms to grow inside. Now it wants to expand its clothing manufacturing in the industry, right? The output of the industry will be affected not only by the possible government support, but also by the use of technology and specialization of workers. So it not only depends on how much support the government is providing to this textile industry manufacturers, however, it also depends on the amount of technology being utilized and how specialized and trained the workers would be. So that's also a concern. All right, I hope the case study is clear. Let's quickly move into what the questions has brought for us today. We'll refer to the source material in all our answers. That's what the instruction says. All right, the first part says calculate the value of Gabon's oil production as a percentage of Gabon's GDP. It's a 1-mark question. It's asking us to calculate how much is oil production a percentage of its GDP. So for that, we look into this first table. Now, on your right, you'll see I have solved this paper for you. And how have I extracted these figures? I've extracted these figures from this table only, the table on the left. So what I've done is, in order to calculate the value of Gabon's oil production as a percentage of Gabon's GDP, in the numerator, you write the oil output, which was $6.6 billion. What was the total GDP that year? $22 billion. So oil production was 6.6 upon 22 billion into 100, because they are asking us for the percentage. It is going to turn around 30%. So your answer is that Gabon's oil production is actually 30% of its GDP. All right. I hope this is clear. It's a straightforward question, 1-mark question. You just put in the figures in this intended formula and you get the answer. All right, part B. Part B asks us to identify 2 external benefits of rainforest. Now, the question, look at the wording of the question. The key term over here is identify. This means from the source only, you are going to identify 2 positive externalities of having rainforest. Remember, we identified earlier, one was that it was protecting against floods, reducing soil erosion, and reducing air pollution. So these are the 3 external benefits. You can choose any 2 out of them, list them, and you will get straight 2 marks. They are just asking you for identification, no explanation. That means you just pick out the 2 external benefits from the source material only. All right, part C. Part C asks us to explain what effect an increase in tourism may have on Gabon's current account of balance of payment. So now what is tourism? Tourism is an export and services. So when Gabon is going to experience an increase in its tourism, which means it is experiencing an increase in its export of services, it is going to bring in foreign exchange. So when foreign exchange inflows are going to be received by Gabon, this means that its income from services is rising. Therefore, its current account deficit would either be falling or current account surplus would be increasing. Since tourism brings in more foreign currency, it will improve the current account balance by either reducing the deficit or increasing the surplus, right? So not only there would be an increase in income from services, there would also be an increase in the country's surplus or a reduction in its balance of payment deficit caused by an increase in tourism. All right. So you give a reason and will give an explanation and you'll get 2 marks. It's a 2-mark question. So 1 mark is for the reason and 1 mark is for a coherent explanation. We'll explain how an increase in services would actually be contributing towards an increase in the current account surplus or a reduction in a deficit because it's a part of the current account, right? The services, the exports and services. All right. Part D. Part D asks us to explain 2 reasons why the Gabonese government wants to reduce reliance on oil. Now it's a 4-mark question. What will you do is you will give 1 reason and explain that reason, you'll get 2 marks. You'll explain the second reason and explain the second reason, you'll get full 4 marks. So 2 marks are for the reasons and 2 marks are for the explanation for each of these reasons. The first reason, oil resources are running out. That's the reason why the government wants to reduce its reduction in oil. The second reason is that the oil industry causes water pollution. Remember, we identified in the source. So, for reason number 1, you would say that too much reliance on oil may cause depletion of non-renewable resource. So, future generations would suffer. So, Gabon's oil industry might close. There would be loss of jobs, unemployment might rise. Its GDP would be falling then because there would be a loss of output. As a result, what should the government do? It should try to diversify and reduce its dependency on the oil production industry, thereby reducing the risk of running out of this natural resource. The second reason, too much dependence on the oil industry means that the government is increasing their pollution level as well. It might give an increase in risk for more oil spills and increase harmful emissions, thereby increasing the level of pollution, which means that the standard of living would decrease and people's health will be in jeopardy and there would be environmental concerns being raised. It would negatively impact the environment. This way, if the government would reduce its dependency on oil production, so not only the level of pollution would fall, it would also contribute towards a healthier environment that would bring in improved tourist destination that would be more greener and attractive, popular tourist destinations, right? They would be pollution free. All right. I hope this is clear. Part E. Part E asks us to draw a demand and a supply diagram to show the effect of discovery of gold deposits on the market for gold. So now if the government has, or the economy has been able to extract more gold deposits, what should be the effect using the demand and a supply diagram? You have to show that. So now it's a 4-mark question. How have they allocated the mark? The first mark is for drawing of the correct axis. The second mark goes for the initial demand in the supply diagram. The third mark is for the shift of the supply curve to the right. And the final 4th mark is to show the correct equilibrium positions. So what we'll do is we'll draw a simple elastic downward sloping demand curve. We'll show a simple supply curve upward sloping. This is the equilibrium initial position when the country has been able to find new gold deposits. So there would be a shift of the supply curve towards the right. As a result, the new equilibrium position would be now P2 and the price would fall from P to P1. As a result, the quantity would increase from Q to Q1. So you've shown all these 4 things on your diagram and you will be rewarded straight 4 mark. You do not need to give any explanation. You just need to depict it using a demand and a supply diagram. A neat and clear demand and supply diagram showing all these four requirements would yield you straight 4 marks. I hope this is clear. All right. Part 4 asks us to analyze relationship of literacy rate and the percentage of labor force employed in agriculture. Like I explained you through this diagram on the left, the higher the amount of literacy rate, the lower the percentage of labor force being employed in agriculture. Why? Because the labor force will be more skilled and more inclined towards having a job in the tertiary sector or the services sector. Now, how would you go about answering these analyzed questions? I explained you a couple of times in my tutorials. Again, this is a very it's the same way I'm going to be explaining today as well. Analyzed questions of section A are to be answered in a different set of pattern to analyze questions of section B. First, you will explain what type of relationship there exists, whether it's a positive, a direct, or a negative, or an inverse relationship. That's the first step towards answering analyzed questions of section A. So, like I said, there exists a negative or an inverse relationship. Why? Because the higher the literacy rate, the lower the percentage of the labor force being employed in agriculture. So you mentioned this 1 mark for this reason. It's a 5 mark question. Now you'll give the evidence. What makes you say that? You can say that if we look at South Africa, 95% literacy rate it has. However, only less than 10% of its labor force is being employed in agriculture. Similarly, if we look at Mali, in which 35% is the literacy rate, that's the lowest rate among the 6 countries, its 80% of labor force is being employed in agriculture. So the lowest rate, the highest amount employed in agriculture, the highest literacy rate, the lowest amount of labor force employed in agriculture. Get it? So you mentioned the evidence, 2 marks. Now, the 3rd mark would be awarded. How? You say a higher literacy rate. Now you will give why is this so. Why? Because a high literacy rate implies that majority of the working population is employed in the tertiary sector or in the services industries. They are higher paid jobs since the labor force is more skilled, or you could say in agriculture, the jobs are less paid because it requires more unskilled jobs, or requires less skilled jobs, right? You mentioned this, 3 marks. Now, the 4th mark. How will you get the 4th mark? However, there exists an exception. Now, what's the exception? The exception is in Gabon itself. Look at Gabon. What's happening? The literacy rate in Gabon is around 85%. However, the percentage of labor force employed in agriculture is what? It's more than 60%. So what you'll say, however, there exists an exception. That's the 4th mark you'll be getting this way. You say Gabon has more than 85% literacy rate. However, approximately 62% of its population is employed in agriculture. Now you'll give the reason behind this. The final 5th mark. It could be that the Gabon's secondary and tertiary sector has less jobs. That is why more of its population is employed in primary sector or the agriculture industry, or maybe agriculture also has skilled jobs, right? This could be the reason why most of its population is employed in agriculture. Either the secondary and the tertiary sector has less jobs, that is why more of its population is employed in agriculture, or the agriculture also has skilled jobs. Get it? This is how you'll be getting full 5 marks. I hope now you've understood the pattern of answering analyzed questions in section A. Moving forward, part G. Part G is again a discussed question. It's a 6-mark question. You will give reasons not exceeding more than 4 marks for answering one side. Again, not more than 4 marks you will be awarded for answering either side. So you have to give a balanced argument. If you want to brush it off with a conclusion, you can. However, if you do not want to, it's up to you. It's a 6-mark question. Why? It's asking us discuss whether or not a government should pay private sector firms to give work experience to unemployed young people. So now, if you think that yes, the government should be offering support to the private sector to employ more of youth in order to reduce unemployment, or you say no, they should not. If you say yes, it should. Why do you think? Why? Because if the government is providing support to firms in order to give more experience to unemployed, it would be increasing the overall employment level, thereby reducing the unemployment level of the country. As a result, the youth would be better trained and more skilled. It would contribute towards a higher output level, yielding to a higher GDP, contributing towards higher standard of living. The private sector's firms' cost would decrease because the training cost would be provided by the government. As a result, their average cost of production would fall, they would increase their production level, the output level would rise, the GDP would increase. Moreover, the confidence of the young people would improve, they would have a better skill set, which means their standard of living would increase, their income levels would rise, as a result, aggregate demand would boost, uh, standard of living would increase, GDP of the country would enhance, overall the output level would increase. It could also contribute to higher export levels, bringing in more foreign exchange, maybe improving the balance of payment situation of the country as well. Thereby, when the country people are going to have experience a higher standard of living, they're going to be spending more. As a result, the government would also be generating a higher tax revenue, which could further be investing it in provision of merit goods or in infrastructure, right, by the government. As a result, it would lead to a higher economic growth, increase in the productive capacity of the country. However, you could say that maybe uh, it might not bring in such windfall advantages or gains for the economy. Why? Because it also involves an opportunity cost. If the government is providing support in order to provide work experience to these unemployed youth, it involves an opportunity cost because it means the government could have been spending less maybe on infrastructure or the provision of health services, right? Again, the quality of the work experience that these individuals might be gaining might not be up to the mark. It might lack in the quality, or they might not be able to develop a sound skill set among these individuals, right? The government expenditure would also increase, and this means that in order to facilitate the provision of these payments in order to provide work experience to these individuals, the government would be charging more tax from already maybe overburdenized taxpayers. It would be imposing more tax in order to generate uh, revenues to support, help to provide work experience to these unemployed individuals. It could also mean that these private firms might get over dependent on the government and they might get inefficient or more corrupt, right? So this is how you would be bringing up a balanced argument. All right. Part H. Part H asks us to discuss whether or not a growth in the size of firms in Gabon's textile industry will reduce their average cost of production. So now you're going to tell, should the firms increase in the economy's increase in the size of its textile industry, would it be in reducing its average cost of production or not? You think expansion in its size would bring a fall in its average cost or not? So if you are providing reasons for, again, you have to provide not more than argument, not exceeding more than 4 marks for each side. Again, then you can finally brush it off with a conclusion. You can say that yes, increasing the size of firms in Gabon's textile industry might reduce the average cost of production because it would reduce its average cost because it would cause economies of scale, right? So output per unit would fall, the cost per unit of output would fall. It would how it would yield toward labor economies. What is labor economy? That means that each worker would specialize in a particular task, thereby increasing the productivity. Output per person would rise and leading towards efficiency. It can also lead towards purchasing economy. That means now, since the farm industry is growing its size, it would be buying raw materials or fabrics or dyes in bulk, thereby experiencing a discount, leading towards a fall in its average cost of production. It could also be that the industry might be experiencing technical economies, which means that it might be having access to innovative technologies or more automated processes, thereby not only increasing its output but also reducing its inefficiency or increasing its efficiency level, right? However, it could be that instead of the average cost of production falling, it might bring in disadvantages. However, how it could be that diseconomies of scale might occur when it could lead towards communication problems or causing delays and errors in production activity. It could be that the firm industry might be experiencing unfavorable industrial relations because there could be lack of communication between workers and management, leading towards dissatisfaction of employees or burnout, thereby reducing their productivity. It could also be that the management would be having issues in controlling such a large size. It could be daunting for the management. Maybe coordination could be challenging, leading towards if inefficiency or a fall in the level of efficiency. Finally, you can conclude that yes, it could be possible that maybe increasing the size initially might be reducing the average cost of production, but too much increase in size will offset the advantages and result in diseconomies of scale. I hope you have understood what we did today and you enjoy solving this paper with me. Stay tuned, subscribe. Happy learning. I'll be back with more such tutorials for you all.